better, and we call that community development or regional development. So we've been talking about a number of those strategies here. We talked about entrepreneurship yesterday. Workforce fits right into the community development side of things a little bit. So I want to spend some time talking about the business attraction part. But I want to do that and put that in context as well as maybe some of the other things and just review a few things along the way. But let's start with some questions. True or false? We can handle all our economic development needs alone.
False.
Okay? I think we have already pretty well made the case, and you know it in the first place, that none of this happens in isolation or in a vacuum. And the more partners you can bring into the process, the more likely success is to be. Any new business is right for our community. Why not?
We may not have the workforce as the skill set for that. Or would we get a company that produces poi in the Midwest that's only sold in Polynesian countries or states?
Yeah, you know, the ski industry in southern Louisiana, not going to happen. Okay, so for a whole variety of reasons, not just any business, I mean, you wouldn't be serving your constituents well by trying to get a business that doesn't fit, and you wouldn't be serving that business well by trying to attract them there. So, no. Our local economic, now let me back up. There are probably a lot of businesses we've never thought about that would fit. And so that's where we got to do our due diligence. Our local economic development director will turn everything around. You said that a little assertively there. What do you mean by that?
It goes back to number one, we can't handle all economic needs alone.
Yeah, it's kind of like the pastor in the church, if you stop to think about it. If the congregation expects the pastor to do all the work, he's going to preach the sermons, he's going to visit the sick, he's going to mow the front yard, he's going to clean the bathrooms, then the ministry is limited by what one person can do. Right? So it's the same in economic development. If you expect one person to do it all, it's not going to happen. How much more happens when we all pitch in, and then that one individual, that economic development director, gets to do what they do best and what their role and responsibility really is, and everybody else is doing their part. I know I'm preaching to the choir. You get that. Toyota will locate here if we provide enough incentives.
Sometimes,
Like when?
if you offer enough incentives.
Theoretically, if you offered enough incentives, if you have trillions of dollars in incentives that you can offer, Toyota, and it goes back again to what we've already said, that Toyota can only go, and automobile manufacturers can only go, but so many kinds of places. Their needs, I want to talk about some of the factors that have to be taken into account. Their needs are pretty sophisticated. Okay, so that's probably not true in terms of scale of our communities. I say that, and then I turn around and I look at Blue Springs, Mississippi. Okay, what did Blue Springs? You know what I'm talking about? What is it? Interstate. Now it's been designated Interstate 22, runs down from Memphis to Birmingham. But what's Blue Springs, Mississippi near? Tupelo. It's in that Tupelo area there, and so they've been operating regionally for a long time, and that's one of the big things that made that happen. One big manufacturer will solve all of our economic problems. Are you going to toss them out? Are you going to turn them away if they come? No, probably not, but we can't expect them to solve all the problems. They'll create some. In fact. Now, not on a spite or anything, that just a big manufacturer coming in, or big anything coming in, is going to create some challenges. You know what you call them that. The state or the utility partners, they're the ones who really control where business is going to locate.
False.
Okay, false. Why do some people think that? In Arkansas, some people think that the state agency is in control of all of this, and they're deliberately overlooking us.
There's some of that thought process going on down here, mainly because the state contracts out to Missouri Partnership, which is a private entity, to attract all business into the state. Now, they're only partially funded by the state of Missouri. The rest of their funding comes from the Hawthorne Foundation,
Okay.
which is mainly funded through Kansas City and St. Louis. So there is a little bit of thought process, and you've got to take care of who feeds you.
Yeah.
So
So there may be some grain of truth to some of that.
a little bit, but not all.
In
Can't make it
general, though,
overall.
they can only take prospects to communities that are prepared, that match up properly, all the workforce, all the other requirements and so forth. And so they do get limited. I mean, that's certainly the case in Arkansas. That politically, the government and the state agency there, it is a state government agency. They have to at least appear as though they're sharing the wealth and giving attention to the communities out in the rural areas especially. But the fact is the half dozen metropolitan areas in Arkansas are the ones who are best prepared, so they get the most visits. A community's best business recruiters are their existing businesses. Very often true. A community's worst business recruiters are their existing businesses. Very often true. Mark's gonna, you haven't done BRNE yet.
I did that yesterday.
You did your.
You were sleeping.
So BRNE, you gotta have your BRNE program going so that you know that you're keeping people on your radar. They know you're keeping them on their radar screen, trying to keep them happy, and include them in the team, include them in the process of recruitment of businesses along the way, so that they're part of the team, they're on board. Yeah.
I was just thinking, one thing I've seen is, to get that quote from that plant manager on what a great place this is, and, these folks came through when I asked for this or that, was when the community started recording these as little YouTube videos, clips, and they put them on their website. Because a company exec would not say that if they didn't mean it.
Yeah.
And if they mean it, they're proud of that, so nobody's going to be objecting to that.
And they wouldn't let it get on the website if they didn't.
Agreed. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea.
That is. Site consultants increasingly expect community skin in the game. Of course. That's kind of a loaded statement there a little bit. I think there is generally an expectation that you're going to see, and I don't know if it's increasingly, I'm not sure it's not always been this way, but increasingly the community is interested in this project happening, that they're willing to step up and improve it as sort of as part of the location decision process. Site location consultants aren't the ones to blame for that. They're looking out for the interest of the business, and they know that they have a business-friendly community if they're stepping up as part of the process. And there are things that can really only be done locally anyway. So that's probably true. Incentives should be a negotiating tool that provides a return on investment. That's true. And we'll talk a little bit more about incentives toward the end of this talk. So I actually really have, really three things I'm going to cover in this conversation. Some is a review of some of the things we've already talked about. I want to re-illustrate them so we can put in a context what business attraction is all about. So attraction is the second set of comments, and then the incentives and how they relate is the third. So we said yesterday that economic performance is basically a process of a balance of trade. Okay, and the balance is are we bringing in more money into the community that creates wealth in the community because we're sending more out than we're bringing in. If we're sending goods and services out, money's coming in, and if the balance of trade in that respect is positive, then we're performing pretty well. If we're buying more from the outside, that means we're sending our wealth out, which is what yesterday we talked about as leakage. We're going to have a lot more to say about that later when we talk about retail. I'll even mention some here. Mark talked about basic industries yesterday. They are basic industries are essentially export industries. They export out of your local economy. Oh, let me back up. Manufacturing, some services, and tourism are the ones that are most likely to be a basic type or export type business. Non-basic is everything else. It's just as important as the basic group, because the non-basic ones are the ones that are serving us. And they're the ones that are taking that wealth that's coming in and turning it over and providing opportunities and jobs locally, but they serve us instead of serving whoever we're selling the goods and service to outside the region. Just as important. Mark talked about the multiplier effect. Here comes a new basic sector income and employment into the area. That could be a new business, which would be business attraction, or it could be an existing business that expands. That's the BRE program. Okay, but here it comes, new incomes, new employment into the area. That generates new non-basic sector income and employment. And so the overall total is bigger than the original amount. But here's an example of how that works. This is real simple, and maybe if you're not into this, maybe this will help give you a perspective. We have a hypothetical area, and we're going to assume, this is just for purposes of the exercise, we're going to assume that in this community, 40% of what comes in leaks out. Okay, so let's see what happens to that. Let's say $100 comes in, or $100,000, or $100 million would be even better. Let's say that comes in, okay, and it's basically there to be spent. And that may be, especially it comes in and it's spent by the employees, okay, that work at whatever the facility is. But 40% of the $100 or $40 leaks out. But of the $100, $60 is still here, and it gets respent in the economy. When it's respent, 40% is respent outside the region, leaving 36 to be respent again in the third run. And so forth on down the list, until you can see, eventually, at 40% rate, eventually the $100 leaks out, the original 100 leaks out, but not before $250 has been generated, has been turned over in the economy. Okay, that's the essence of the multiplier, and in this case you can calculate it's a number, and it's very simply, it's the 250 over the 100, or 2.5. Okay? Everybody with me on that? Now, if you want it, now the idea is, any business that's going to bring money in, we really want that multiplier to be as big as it can be, right? So what would you do here, you mathematicians, to make the 2.5 a bigger number?
Reduce your leakages.
Okay, reduce the 40% to 30% or something, right? And then this number, you'd have a couple more rounds of spending if you did that, $4 leaked out, and the 250 might be 300 or something. Now, the other thing that you can do is work to make that $100 bigger to start with. And when you do that through a business attraction program or a BRE program where you're trying to expand your existing businesses. Another thing I always have to point out, well, two other things. Number one, you see around round 9, all of this has kind of worked its way up, right? Some people, do we have anybody here that works for a tourism visitors bureau or something like that? You did or you do?
On board.
You're on the board? I still can say whatever I want, right? I don't know why it is, but a lot of tourism and visitors people say the multiplier is 9. Because it was 9 rounds of spending before it all leaked out. Okay? Multipliers of 9 are virtually unheard of, and they probably don't apply to tourism type businesses. In Little Rock, we have a downtown river fest every year. A lot of people come to the thing. And they always, give you the economic impact of the river fest. And it kind of tickles me because, millions and millions of dollars for this three-day thing. Okay? Now, how much of that let's say $5 million impact was spent by people that were already in the community to begin with? So it didn't come from outside, did it? It's money that's turning over in the community. Best you can say is, well, they didn't go to somebody else's river fest and and take it outside the community, so the leakage was prevented. Okay, so a lot of times tourism-related things inflate the multiplier number unusually. The other aspect of that is tourism events tend to be one-time events. Big thing you got to do here is make sure this process is, while this is going on, and all these rounds of spending are happening, somebody else is injecting another $100 into the system to keep it going. And then you've got a sort of it's a pyramid, and it's all happening and continuing to turn over in the economy. So this would be an example of a one-time event, that $100. And after round 9, it's all gone, and you gotta wait for that event to come around again next year. So the manufacturing activity, for example, and some tourism, it's a year-round thing, so the $100 just keeps coming and coming and coming. Yeah.
You know, your comment, you make me think that, you know, for folks who do have festivals and that sort of thing, it's imperative that we actually capture where people really are coming from so we can make that argument.
Yeah.
That, well, we're really getting 60% of our people from somewhere else, so then we can count that as a basic activity. Plus, it makes a great news story.
And festivals and any kind of tourist-related events are great. Historical things, they're great. They're important parts of the economy because they do bring some money in from outside, and that's important. The other thing about Riverfest is a lot of the vendors that come and are served as vendors at Riverfest, where do they come from? Counties and states away from there, and where do they take their money when the event is over? Take it right back out of the economy. So, have to be careful with the use of the multiplier. I just kind of wanted to emphasize that after we talked about it yesterday. When we talk about economic impact, then, we've got to identify all these things. The jobs, the payroll, the taxes collected. We've got to figure out the capture and the leakage and the effects of that, and the community costs that are associated with it. Okay? There's impact analysis, economic impact analysis, which is a pretty useful tool. Like if you're measuring the impact of a new project that might be coming in, or even if it's an existing business, what's the impact of it ramping up and adding a third shift, let's say? Okay? You can measure the impact of that. There's some pretty sophisticated models that are pretty accurate. And they can really show you what it's worth. And then, beyond the economic impact analysis is the fiscal impact analysis, because any new project is going to cost us something, right? The city's going to have to maybe extend water and sewer, fire and police protection is increased and so forth. So you've got to measure that, the benefits of the impact against the costs of the additional services. And there's a lot of analysis that can go into this. Mark talked about that poultry processing plant yesterday. This is what they all calculated. Direct jobs, 800 people in that thing didn't have a job the next morning after it burned down. 2,800 other people were linked to that. Probably a lot of them were poultry, chicken farmers. Okay, and all of the suppliers and so forth that would go into that process. All of a sudden, those jobs were impacted by that. And then, if you stop to think about it, these 800 people, direct impact, and these 2,800 indirect impact, what are they doing with their paychecks? Spending it mostly. Not a whole lot of savings going on, but even savings might be considered to be an expenditure if you're investing in a sense. But they're spending their money, right? And that many people, what is it, 3,600 people there? Is enough to probably have an impact, and Mark talked about the impact on the city of Fort Smith nearby, because there's got to be more workers in the service sector, retail and service sector, doing the jobs necessary to serve those people, and so they can buy what they want to buy. So that's what we call that induced impact. The induced impact is a result of the spending of those. So the total impact of that facility was almost 4,400 people that were affected by it. You know, now some of them were probably fairly quickly were able to get new jobs, and some of the indirect the supplier people and so forth were probably able to find some alternatives, but it still impacted the economy of the region very significantly. So you can measure impact when it's negative like that, and we can do the same thing for when it's a positive. talk about leakage. Here's a community or a county, and somebody went out and you can get this information, and it measured the leakage from the county. So here's the leakage factor all the way down to 100%. So there's some, I know you probably can't read these, but here's specialty food services, shoes, home furnishings, drinking places, department stores, and books. All money in that county being spent on those goods and services are being spent outside that county. 100% leakage of that money. So you gotta go somewhere else you wanna get a drink, right?
Dry County in Arkansas.
It's probably a dry county, yeah. Except, somebody is selling beer, wine, and liquor up here, because not all of that's is leaking out of that. So I don't know, you may have a, grocery type, limited sales. I don't know how that works. But, and the interesting thing on this, the only one that's positive is building materials and supplies in that county. So, and this is probably a pretty extreme example, but it just goes to show you there's, for many counties, especially in our areas, in the DRA region that it serves, this is not uncommon to have that kind of leakage. Mark's going to talk about what we do with that in the retail sector later. Yesterday, Mark had a slide up and he talked about it, and it basically talked about the 3 Ps of economic development. Economic development is a process, it's a practice, and it's a profession. There's the profession of economic development. I like to refer to those as the 3 Ps. And the economists are the ones that like to talk about the process. They like to study it, understand it better, know how it works, and that's important for us to know. But then eventually we got to do something in a practical way to do something about it for the benefit of our community, and that's the practice side. Okay, and so a lot of times when people are talking about economic development, some are talking about the process, some are talking about the practice, and some of us will be talking about the profession. Okay, in fact, you got 3 certified economic developers as instructors here. Okay, that's a part of the professional aspect of economic development. Okay, well, on the practice side, here's the way I always like to refer to economic development. The practice of economic development may be viewed as a specialized form of marketing. Do we have any marketers in here? Anybody who's taken marketing, you kind of with me a little bit? Okay, but you're not calling yourself a marketer. Okay. And you're certainly not calling yourself an economist. Okay. That's then they say about an economist. Those are the ones that couldn't pass the personality test to be an economist. They're the ones that study the process. Okay? Now we're going to look at the practice, and that's more of a marketing perspective, I think. The purpose, we're trying to create and maintain a community that fosters this wealth creation process. To me, that wealth creation is a part of quality of life. It's probably, to me, the critical part of quality of life and the quality of a place. Are we generating the wealth that allows the people in our area to go out and make the purchases and do the investments and earn the wealth that they want and they need in their way? That's wealth creation. That's quality of life. Okay, so that's the purpose on the economic development side. So my question, and we kind of hinted at this yesterday, if you buy all that, if it is a specialized form of marketing, what's the product? What are we selling? By the way, marketing and selling are not the same thing. Selling is a part of marketing. But what are we marketing? What's the product? Great. The community, whatever your area that you serve, your jurisdiction, that's your product. That's what you're trying to market. I'm hearing harps.
That's appropriate.
What's the market? Who are you trying to sell it to?
Anybody and everybody.
That's what I'm saying.
No, we already said that's not exactly true. We can be
First, you
way
need to
more
sell it to
specific.
yourself, to the people around you. You're not going to sell it to
Those
anybody else.
you're trying to attract. Those what? Companies? More specific than that.
How about your emerging clusters in your target industries or whatever.
Yeah, and that's true, more specific than that. Who are you trying to market this to? Say again? People. The individuals are the ones that you're trying to influence to make a positive decision about your community. Some of them are already in your community. That's the entrepreneurship side of things, or the existing business side of things. Some of them are out there somewhere, and we're trying to influence their decision. Well, do you realize that every business makes a locational decision? They make a decision of where to locate every day. The donut shops, because we've got two represented here. They made a decision of where to locate today. What'd they decide? Locate where they were yesterday, right? Okay, what about tomorrow? They gonna be here tomorrow?
It's open up down today.
Yes, well, we did our share.
Depends on the length of the lease.
Okay, so probably they're gonna be here tomorrow. They'll make a decision to open up again tomorrow. But every once in a while, some businesses say, we can't do that. We're gonna have to move, close down, scale back, or we're gonna have to expand. Okay? And we're gonna do it here. And then a lot of other businesses say, okay, I'm out here, I'm looking for a place to do business. I've already got some locations scattered around, and there's a hole right here in this section of Missouri. And, I think I'd like to do business there. And what we want to, our job in business attraction is to say, how can we get them, first of all, to know we're here, know we exist, and that we're a place they might want to consider. And then once we get them that into their thinking, how can we convince them? That's the selling part of marketing. But everything that leads up to that is a whole lot of market research, all the targeting and the cluster stuff, and all the planning that has to be done in order to get there. Okay, so marketing is really when I say marketing, I'm talking about comprehensive marketing, not just selling. Selling is an important piece of it, but it's only marketing. So here, we're trying to deal with all of these types of businesses. Here's that extraction one that we said we didn't have much yesterday. Manufacturing, all of those very general types of sectors. And we've already emphasized this enough. Your economy grows with startups and entrepreneurship, growth of existing companies and new business. New business, American companies that want to relocate or want to locate something new, maybe a new branch facility. It's not necessarily a relocation from somewhere else. They just need more capacity. So they need to build a new facility somewhere. Or what they call direct foreign investment. Companies from outside the United States that want to locate here. Okay, so we're talking especially about that group right there. And I said yesterday we had these 4 things that represent the key strategies in economic development practice, focusing on, in this case, manufacturing, but it's the same 4 for any of the other ones. Okay, can't read these very well. But retail and services, housing, fire, anybody know what fire means? Finance, insurance, and real estate sector. The extraction, there's tourism, and so forth. Okay? Same 4 principles apply to any sector or any type of business, any specific business. And we got to decide which combination of those to use. And then, as I said, up top of ACRE, then we also throw in the practices dealing with making our product better, which the marketers would call product development. Community development is what we call it, or regional development. Or neighborhood development, maybe, even if it's at that scale. So here is the traditional marketing strategy from years back in economic development practice, which used to be called industrial development practice. Okay, so here's the manufacturing sector, focused pretty much solely on that, and it was huge on this attraction thing. And didn't care much about creating new jobs or expanding existing ones or even retaining. And this was especially during the 50s and 60s and when the manufacturing sector post-World War II was exploding. And businesses were trying to find new locations everywhere. and expand in locations everywhere. So it makes sense that we were big on attraction, and we didn't need to worry too much about whatever that input is. Transportation, quality of life factors figure in, but probably not until you get down into the lower echelons of the geographic scale. I mean, if they have decided market access in the United States, they know they're going to find some place with a decent quality of life somewhere in the United States. So quality of life doesn't figure in on that scale. Infrastructure, cost of doing business, what's the business climate? Now there's kind of a couple scales there. It could be a state scale consideration. I'll show you an example in a minute. We're talking about incentives. And then, down at the community level, is this a business-friendly community? Those types of decisions. Taxes and fees, and that type of thing. So, again, these are just a sampling of the kinds of things they take into consideration. And I just wanted to emphasize that some of them are more important depending on the scale. The question is, which of these can you impact? In your community, can you do anything about global access from your community? It is what it is, right? Can you do anything about, getting access to the nearest major highway? Maybe. Okay, maybe you can cut a road in, if it's a piece of property next to a major highway or even an interstate. You can do things to help improve the business climate locally. But some of these others, it is what it is from the standpoint of the local leadership. So, I want to talk about, going back to this idea of, from our point of view now, what we want to do is identify the businesses that are most likely to be successful here, that are going to fit, and that's the ones that we need to really try to target. We need to focus on. In marketing circles, they will use the term market segmentation all the time. And it's another one of those 50-cent words for kind of a two-bit idea, but it's a very important two-bit idea. Essence is captured in two famous quotes. Henry Ford said they could have any color car they want as long as it's black. Okay? The Tin Lizzie, okay, the old Model T, one of the ways he was able to achieve huge economies of large-scale production is by standardizing things so much that there was one color, black. And so, think of it this way, he got huge quantity discounts for black paint. Okay? But the problem is, at the same, so he was very successful at that. Henry Ford carved out a huge market share of the automobile industry in the 20s, and in the teens in particular, and then on into the 20s. Now, all the way up to today, it's still a significant market share. But in the 20s, he began to lose market share. Why? Because of what Alfred Sloan of General Motors said. We will build a car, because Henry Ford was stubborn, we will build a car for every purse and every purpose. Sloan and General Motors had recognized that by now the market for the motor vehicles had gotten so large that they could actually start producing different kinds of cars and still achieve economies of large-scale production for the different cars. So they could make, an economy car, they could make a luxury car, a fast car, all of these different market segments were identified, and they started producing a product for every segment. A car for every purse and every purpose. That's market segmentation. Now that's kind of what targeting is all about, but here's our issue. We only got one product. We can't go out and make our community a different car than it is. Okay? So, the only thing you can do is if you don't like the car you got to move to a different car. Go to a different community, right? We don't have that choice. So we only got one car, and that means we can only appeal to one segment of the market. We got to find out what that segment is and really hammer home on that segment. Okay? If we're an economy car region or area, community, there's no sense in trying to appeal to a luxury car market. Make sense? So the solution is we got to target the ones that we know are going to match what we own. Match your assets, coincide with your economic development goals. You look for businesses that, and somebody mentioned this, they have investment and growth potential. So within the general category of business targets that look like they're going to fit your area, we try to do a little more research and figure out, well, which of those are growing, kind of on a growth curve, or which are declining. Probably the growth ones are ones where we got the best shot at attracting a business out of that segment into our area. So we're matching our assets with what the prospect needs. Our locational advantages match up with their locational requirements. It's a matching process. Now, essential marketing techniques, and this does get into the selling part of marketing. Most areas, even with a small population and budget, can do these things. This is critical. Website especially. That's going to be the place where those consultants and any type of business is going to go to try to look at the information you have. Now, they may have a lot of that information collected from somewhere else already. So they're looking at the website to get new information and to confirm the information they got. This is why we have to be careful that we tell the truth. This is a story of the community that they had a really favorable, what was it, maybe something like an unemployment rate or something in 1 year, and then it wasn't so favorable 3 years later. It says, oh, let's just keep the old one. In this business, be sure your sins will find you out. Is probably, so you got to have a really good website that's got accurate, up-to-date information, and they use that. They'll be looking at that, and you may not even know it. Social media, there's kind of a debate, but there is some evidence to suggest that the use of social media is helpful in this process. They will be, it might be, they might go on a social media site and see what people are saying about your community. And it's kind of useful for you to check those social media and see what people are saying and get some balance in there if there's a lot of negative things.
Just have a question. Do you think that that's changing also with generations? The use of social media in business applications like that? I don't know. What do you think?
Anybody here have an opinion? What do you think? You know anything about this?
I think it depends on the sector that you're looking at. Service sector and retail are and more prevalent with service sector is more apt to focus in on social media, but manufacturing not as much. I wouldn't say. Not yet.
We certainly went on social media last night and to see what TripAdvisor had to say about Savers. Or is it Savor?
Savor.
Yeah. 4.5 out of 5.
And how do you counteract the naysayers? I mean, I've almost found it's better to ignore them than to ignite a firestorm under negativity.
Yeah, and you can't, people are going to be negative. And people say, well, just wait till they die, and you can't because they breathe too fast. So it's tough to wait them out. In social media, one method of attack is to get on there with a lot of positive stuff and drown out the negative.
Yeah.
That requires some time. Okay, so, and there's a place, Atlas Advertising? Is that what,
The GIS?
huh?
For GIS?
The social media folks that are always doing webinars and stuff for IEDC,
Oh.
Atlas Advertising.
Yeah, it's Ben Wright's group, I can't remember the name of his
Yeah.
group.
There is an outfit that's out trying to measure, and they've got a pretty strong case that there are some advantages that communities that are on the social media are getting some hits. It may be happening way early in that process just to get them aware that you're out there. Okay? Press releases, but very important in all of this, even when you've done these, is building relationships. This has been one of the key elements of economic development practice for centuries, I guess, okay? And that is the whole relationship building process. And it used to be that the economic developer would go to Chicago or Detroit or Cleveland or something and talk to all the manufacturers and try to entice them to come down and build a branch facility. Okay? Not doing that so much anymore. Some of that is happening, but it's happening in the context of a much more detailed and strategic process of building relationships with these decision makers directly. A lot of times now, you can do this through local businesses and their contacts. You can sort out what's called supply chain linkages. You got a business here, who's doing business with your business? Okay, if it's coming from outside, there's a potential prospect. Build a relationship with them. So some larger communities can afford to take us a little further with things like newsletter and hiring a professional firm to manage the publicity. Attendance at trade shows has been a kind of a strong staple if it's done right over the last couple of decades, because at trade shows, that's where the businesses are. They're there because it's part of their trade, and you get to interface with them and establish relationships. That's the theory. Site selection or industry conferences are happening. In Arkansas, they probably do this in Missouri as well. There'll be a couple of times a year that the state agency and the local and the state professional organizations and a group of allies like that will sponsor a program where economic developers, if they buy in a little bit, so they're paying some of this cost, they will all go together to a particular location like Chicago and visit with groups of prospects or their consultants there, or Dallas, or Atlanta. Getting your story right in front of the people who are making some of these decisions. That's somewhat effective for the communities that can afford to do that. Or in other cases, local programs or events that are hosted locally. Again, it's pretty expensive and it's used maybe a little less than it used to, but what they used to call FAM tours, familiarization tours, where you bring the consultants to your community and show it off. The problem is you've got to invest a lot to get them there. And a lot of those consultants are really busy and don't have time for a lot of that anymore. Okay, so the whole idea is how can I get myself in front of them? How can I build the relationships? The advertising side of things. And there's a whole discussion out in the economic development profession about branding right now. How are we branded? What is Ferguson's brand right now? You going to locate in Ferguson? Okay, that's not the brand they're promoting, but that's the perception, right? Big issue. A brand is you're trying to develop your brand, and this is your identity now, right? It's got to be based in reality. You can't say in Bogalusa, Louisiana, that we're the snow ski capital of the world. You just can't do it. So it has to be believable. It's simple, appealing, distinctive. Now here, look at this. What this list says doesn't matter. This is kind of an illustration. But this summarizes. This is in Illinois, okay, and this is how rural counties in Illinois describe themselves. And this Western Illinois University did this study. And they came up, there's a lot of them had terms like cozy, historic, okay, hub city, recreation. What is cozy? What do you think of when you hear the word cozy? What's a cozy community? What do you think of?
Retirement community.
Might be a retirement community, yeah. Again, if you're a business looking to locate places, how is that business going to cozy? Oh, it's so nice. Probably roll up the sidewalks at 6, or maybe earlier. It's just nice and cozy. It's not probably a place that instills the sense that this is going to be a vibrant location for us to locate in. Historic is important, but you don't want the history to be, well, this community is all burned out and all they have is the past to live in. So that's a balance there. I love Hub County. In 1860, 2 railroads crossed. And that was a Hub County, okay? Now, they tore up the rails for both of them in the 1960s, but it's still a Hub County, right? So we gotta be careful with that. Recreation, bedroom community, okay, so these are some of the terms that were used. Bedroom community is, what does that mean? Everybody's asleep.
No businesses there.
Here's an interesting one. Anybody been to Pella, Iowa? I guess, Mark, this is as far north in the DRA region we're going to get, or north toward Iowa, and no one's been there yet when I've asked this question.
My dad lived there, he loved it.
Okay, so you get it. And so they have a lot of Dutch culture there in that community. And so they have tulips there and a lot of cultural heritage related to Holland. And so they developed a strategy all geared around that. And it's a tourist draw. A touch of Holland. Vancouver, outside the country in a much larger city, but they've tried to brand themselves as the green economy. So here's some lessons learned in attraction. Don't rely, I think we've beat this horse, but let's beat it one more time. Don't rely on attraction as the only approach. Don't give up on attraction. It's still an important approach, and we'll sure take it if we can get them. But while we're waiting and while we're working to attract a business here, let's make sure we're working on the other strategies. The local businesses that already exist, let's keep them vibrant, keep them going so we don't lose any ground, and hopefully let's help them grow. You know, it's probably the best use of limited economic development resources in trying to help your existing businesses to expand. They're already there. You don't have to extend the sewer. You know, typically, a lot of infrastructure doesn't have to be put in for a business that's already there. And they're already committed to your community. If you can find a way to help them expand, that'll do two things. It'll probably keep them from leaving, okay? And you know they're going to stay because they're already there. Investments in attraction must be patient money. I like to use the example, anybody know where Pine Bluff, Arkansas is?
Yes.
About 45 miles southeast of Little Rock. Pine Bluff has been experiencing a pretty significant decline in the last decade or two. Actually, they dropped out of being a metropolitan statistical area because their population level went below the minimum. So they got some issues there. Well, they just announced a $3 billion investment in a gas-to-liquid facility there. Would any of you turn that down if you could get a $3 billion investment in a gas-to-liquid facility in your community? Huge capital investment. Now, it's not going to employ that many workers, maybe only 200 people. What's the salary of that 200 people going to be? Oh boy, right? So that's really going to be a shot in the arm. Well, my point on patient money, they've been working that project for over 10 years. We can't base our efforts in business attraction solely on marketing, and by that I mean salesmanship, trying to make the sale. Everything has to ultimately be a value proposition, and that's both directions to me. Obviously, the business has to see that there is value in what you're proposing to them, but there's got to be value in it to you as well. Now, Mark, how much time do I have left?
5 minutes?
5 minutes, okay, I will go through this quickly. Incentives, because that's part of the value proposition. Used widely all across the United States, a lot of controversy, a lot of legality and challenges and so forth, and, you know, and here's Illinois, and, you know, are you all saying up here, thank God for Illinois?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I grew up in Illinois, I feel bad about it. Okay? I don't have family back there much anymore or anything, so I didn't go back much, but they're in a mess. And state government, they stopped all economic incentives for business. because of their budget problems. We were there, not right after they did this, doing one of these. Oh, it was gloom and doom. Because all of a sudden, all the local and the state economic developers, they don't have that tool in their toolbox to try to attract new business and keep the business process going. And they're in bad enough shape in Illinois anyway. So that's almost cutting off your nose to spite your face. Because now they're all of a sudden much less competitive than they were before. First course of action with incentives is let's offer as many non-financial incentives as we can. And there are some. Or basically things that don't cost us much. Job training. Now, yeah, there's a cost to the job training programs that we have, but those programs are out there already, right? What we're saying is let's get them here and have them tailor-made to what we're trying to accomplish. And from our point of view locally, that's not a cost to us. Infrastructure improvements sometimes isn't much of a cost. Technical assistance, a lot of technical work if you can tap into your local university and even your two-year colleges, they can provide some technical assistance, and they're happy to do it because you're training the students. You know, they're learning along the way. We did a lot of this in Mackinac in Mississippi, and even some in Arkansas. We were delivering technical assistance at virtually no charge to the community. Here's some common non-financial incentives, and one of them is the availability of data. Availability of a listing of building and sites in the region. Information on certified sites. How about just simply introducing them to leaders in the community when the chance arises? Permitting. Labor market analyses. That's one thing we did at the university. We helped our local economic developers in the region with a really useful labor market analysis that they would actually take and put in front of prospects. Peer-to-peer interviews and so forth. We've got a number of examples. I'll only talk about this one. This is Daytona Beach, again, near Daytona Beach. Holly Hill, Florida. Population 11,700, but they're right next to Daytona Beach. So it's not necessarily exactly the kind of area that we relate to. But look at what they did. Maybe there's an idea we can get out of this. This mayor said, you know, look, well, what do you think of when you hear Daytona Beach? Racing, motorsports, right? Okay. So why don't we take off from that, take advantage of that? So they did a SWOT analysis, and they saw an opportunity. Okay? And so they developed some non-financial incentives, pretty much. Detailed business information, free workforce training, B2B introductions, special zone that they created for motorsports-related businesses. And as a result of that, they attracted 6 new companies over 2 years to their area. Mostly on using these kinds of non-financial incentives. That's something we can do locally. And then, you know, workforce development, this is Louisiana's Fast Start program. You have one here, and Joy has already talked about workforce. Then we can get into the area of loans, which theoretically, if they're loans, they'll get paid back. Very useful to have revolving loan funds if you can do it. Other incentives might be grants, maybe equity investments. And then I want to focus on this just for a minute, and Mark can pick up on it later. Tax increment financing. Anybody not know what that means? TIF? Okay, you got a piece of property here unimproved. How much tax is it generating? Nothing, right, to speak of. If a business that's looking in your area comes into that piece of property, all of a sudden it's much more valuable and can be taxed more accordingly. That difference in what it's worth now and what it will be worth if that business comes is a value you're not realizing now, but if it comes, you will. The idea of tax increment financing is let's borrow from that value and put in some some things that cost at the front end to help improve that site. It's usually infrastructure, roads, or whatever that has to go into the site based on this increment in the taxes that we anticipate. That's tax increment financing. And that's being used in a lot of communities. You're at an advantage over Arkansas if you can do that here, because we can't do that very much in Arkansas. Because the kinds of taxes that have to be abated if that project comes in, are mostly school taxes, and they won't let us do it. Schools usually don't cooperate. So we don't get the business, and the school doesn't get the money. But that's the way it is. Goal is to select the best location to do business. Both sides of the decision-making process, yours and theirs. We want the best location. When it comes to incentives, you need to know that many site selectors, many consultants in particular, are paid a commission. Part of what they're paid is a commission off of the incentives that they negotiate. That to me is a conflict of interest in some respects, and it's bothersome, but you need to be aware that that sometimes happens. So they're going to be pushing for incentives. You have to push back and make sure you're not giving away anything you don't have to. And incentives usually are not the most important factor, believe it or not. Certainly in those higher scales where they've been going through the process and you don't even get to know it yet. Before you consider an incentive, identify goals and targets and set out guidelines and measure the cost and the benefit and rate of return. Here's some examples of how you could lay criteria down and impose them on a business when they come in and say, this is what we expect as a result of these incentives. And usually we expect a certain number of jobs to be created. Maybe sometimes we can have performance criteria that are related to the quality of the jobs, minimum investments required in the area. If they don't hit those minimums, you get some of the investment money back. It's called clawback. Okay? And businesses don't necessarily like that, but if they know that's there up front, that's okay. We just had a Hewlett-Packard facility that came in Conway, Arkansas, just north of Little Rock, a few years ago, and they had some incentives, and they didn't meet their criteria, and the state got some of the money back. But they knew, everybody knew what was going on all along. Have to monitor and evaluate this process using incentives all along the way. I think we got a little embarrassed again in Arkansas because we weren't monitoring real well, and so the media decided they would. And they had to scramble to come up with some information, be transparent and so forth. Here's an example in Ohio of how they work together regionally around Cleveland, and they set a business-friendly tone and did some things that didn't cost a lot of money, and then they trained their staff and developed an incentive portfolio that they monitored. Maine looked at their ROI. There's a lot of good information about incentives. Alternative incentives, this is a study done by the International Economic Development Council that's available, and some of this information came from that. Here's another one on using incentives strategically. And here's the key questions. Is this incentive necessary? It's called the but-for clause. But for this incentive, this business would not come here. Okay, that's kind of the bottom line. And you got to really do the due diligence to be able to answer that question as accurately as possible. Have we used non-financial incentives first? Can we leverage state incentives? And so forth. At the end of the day, which is a term I hate, bottom line, another term, okay? Ultimately, businesses should come for all the right reasons, and incentives shouldn't be one of them. And the question is, why would anybody move here, and why would anybody stay here? Okay, and those are the key questions that should be part of the matching process that we're talking about. So quality of place may be part of the answer to that. And a couple of other examples you can look at in your thumb drive. Here's a summary. Market your location to your businesses first. Any targeted marketing program should include your local businesses. You need to know where your local businesses fit into your priority system. Okay? Establish a positive image. Continually strive to improve your assets and market your unique assets to the kinds of companies that are looking for more than just a bargain. Okay? And that's business attraction in a nutshell. A whole lot more to it. I wish we had time, and we will on some future occasion, to actually sit down and maybe do some mock prospect interviews and look at what needs to go into preparing to actually host the prospect. And then what happens to close the deal, some of those aspects of the business attraction process. But this at least scratches the surface. Any last minute questions? I've kind of gone over and I apologize.
Now, you bring up, how many folks have been through a mock prospect or a prospect visit?
Real or imagined, huh?
Yeah, either way. It's like a job interview, isn't it? That would be fun to do, a mock prospect
Yeah.
deal.
The Missouri Partnership here in the state will do mock visits.
They will?
If you request it, yes.
Good, good.
And I encourage everybody to experience that.
Opening experience.
It is. You actually get nervous. I mean, it's really, it's like a, and even though everyone's role playing, but you really get into it, and then I am guessing that they evaluate how the community performs. It's really kind of fun.
Well, I hope this helped give you a perspective, to the extent you didn't already have it, on what business attraction is all about.